From Your World Discovered, my name is David Ewen, and here on EPN, I have Molly Elise, who will be talking about her book, The Miles Between. And The Miles Between has been out for a couple of years, so we're going to talk a little bit about the book and how it's doing so far. Molly, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Now, let's first talk about what the book is about. The common question, what is it about?
So it's about a young man in Japan. He's a high school student, and he has the opportunity to come to the United States to study in a college environment. And it's just the story of his international experience, but it's told through the eyes of his partner who stays behind in Japan.
Now, how did you pick Japan as a starting location? How did you pick Japan as opposed to, do you have a connection with Japan, or what was it about Japan?
Yeah, so it's the book is in no way biographical or autobiographical. It is a fiction. But when I was 19 and 20, I did 2 study abroad experiences to Japan as part of my bachelor's degree. And so that inspired quite a lot of the book. And then in my mid 20s to my late 20s, I work in international higher education, and in my mid to late 20s, I was working with a lot of groups coming in from Japan. So I had the experience of going to Japan as a student and being a foreigner there, and I also had the experience of welcoming Japanese students to the United States and watching their experiences, watching them acclimate to my culture. So that was the inspiration for the book.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this is spoken, there's a student that goes from Japan to the United States, but the story is told by the person who's still, his partner still in Japan. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit about, without any spoilers, tell us a little bit about what the story is about.
So one of the things that fascinated me when I was younger, I did a lot of travel internationally. I was an international recruiter for quite some time. And one of the things that fascinated me was the experience of my partner staying here in the United States and watching kind of the divide between us grow as I explored the world. I had a lot of growing up to do. I was a very, very late bloomer. And so it was fascinating to me to empathetically watch him try to cope with me changing. And so that's a lot of where the main character of the book comes from, is trying to imagine what David, my partner, was experiencing with me being gone for months on end and then coming home very different and much more independent. And then what it was like after we were married, with me traveling for work and contacting him and saying, either this amazing thing happened today when I was roaming the streets in Bangkok, or this horrible thing has happened to me, and I'm miserable over here and I just want to come home. And just watching him experience not being there and just being on the sidelines and watching it kind of helplessly. A really good example is when I was, 24, 25, I was in Taiwan on business, and I ate something bad, had a horrible allergic reaction to it, and I called him on Skype, could barely talk around the stomach cramps. I had broken out in a bad rash on quite a bit of my body, running a very high fever, and there was nothing he could do but just be there and talk to me and say, "I'm so sorry, I hope you feel better, can you still breathe?" That sort of thing. So that's kind of where the book comes from. So the main character, Ikeda, is the one who remains in Japan, and his partner Hashida is the one who goes to America. And Hashida is extremely needy, extremely shy, very awkward before he leaves Japan. And as part of study abroad, you can't not grow up when you're in a foreign country by yourself. You have to become much more independent and much more assertive, or you'll go crazy. It's not possible to not grow up in that process. And so it was a fun way to explore the process of being left behind as the person you love is growing up before your very eyes.
So this sounds like it's a story of separation, but the separation is going from one country to another country and the emotional aspects associated with that. What made you decide I'm going to tap into that? You mentioned your experience, but what was it that what was the seed that planted that this is an important story to tell?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Well, it started out as a short story. I think that's important to recognize. It started out on, I think it's chapter 6. It's been a while since I read my own book. That's embarrassing. But it started out as a short story of a man saying goodbye to his partner in the airport, knowing that it would be at least a year, maybe longer, before they saw each other again, and him trying to, posture and put on the tough guy act in public, and then behind closed doors, just hurting, just allowing himself to feel pain and express emotion in a way that maybe isn't as culturally acceptable for men. Um, and from there, it kind of grew into what would it be like leading up to that emotional, I hesitate to use the word climax, but that emotional, that point in the story. What would be the lead up? What would it be like knowing that inevitably the person you love is going overseas? And then what would it be like in the aftermath? What would it be like after the separation? Would it get easier? Would it be harder? Would it hurt less? Where would it hurt more? Where would it hurt less? And so just kind of starting from that point and moving both directions, that's where the story just kind of came from. I don't write from an outline. I didn't know how the story was going to end. I remember writing the last bit of the last chapter. I was sitting on my front porch. It was a beautiful summer morning, and I was just typing away, and I got to the end, and the character turned around and said to me, that makes me sound really crazy, but he turned around and he said, "That's it. We'll be okay without you now." And I knew that the book was over, but there was no planning. It was just taking a thought for a walk, I guess.
I'll share with you a personal story, which is important because it leads into my next question. Before we were on camera, I had mentioned to you before, my wife is not American. She's from South America. She's from Colombia. And when she moved to the United States for a short little vacation, she had left her parents, who she loved very much, behind. Her cousins talked her into staying. And after a while, I met her. And 6 months after I met her, we were married. That was 14 years ago. And we're still happily married. But I remember when we got married fairly quickly, so her parents were not there. We were on a video conference, so we had sort of the international celebration, wine glasses in both countries. But what happened was a year after we were married, that's when her parents moved to the United States. And around Christmas time, just shortly before Christmas time, I met her parents for the very first time in Rockefeller Center in New York. And I saw, it was very emotional. How do you write that emotion? So you understand what I'm talking about. That's why I told the story, because I observed the emotion.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you write about that?
Um, so I write very quickly. I'm very blessed to be a good touch typist. My typing teacher in 8th grade, God bless her. And so it's hard to describe. When I'm writing, I can see and feel and smell and taste everything that's going on. And so I type as fast as I can and encompass as much of it as I possibly can, as fast as my fingers can type. Now, most people, when they go back and edit, they delete things, and they say, editing is your worst enemy, don't edit. It's not the way it works for me. When I edit, I go back in and I can slow down because the skeleton of it is there, and I can go in and fill in the muscle. And so in writing those scenes, the scenes where they're reunited, or the scenes where something isn't going the way one of the characters wants it to go, or there's a strong emotion. I feel like I'm seeing it. I'm definitely feeling it. I feel everything that I write. And so I just do my best to put into words the gravity of it. And again, because this book was written from me trying to imagine what my partner was going through when I was doing a lot of international traveling, I think it helped that I was trying to imagine what he was going through and trying to put that into words for myself, trying to comprehend his experience. Because then it was just, one step into fiction to explain what the character was feeling instead of what I think my partner was feeling.
So now that the book's been out for a couple of years, I think it was in June 8th of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
What have people said about the book?
So it's interesting. I've had a couple of people ask me, well, what advice would you give writers? Don't let your family read it, because your family won't hold back on the criticism. Um, the book is very much for adults. It's not something that I would let a minor read. It does involve the whole spectrum of human experience, which does mean that there is some sexual content to it. And so the feedback that I've gotten has been, the story's great, the characters are great, I can't wait to find out what happens next. Holy crap, there's a lot of sex in this book. And it's been frustrating for me as a woman. I don't feel like if I were a man, I would have gotten quite as much of the surprise that people are experiencing that I'm writing about that kind of content. I think it's something that that the world, or at least that our culture, doesn't expect women to think about, talk about, be interested in. And so there's been some shaming going on, which has been, it was extremely unpleasant at the start. You put your heart and soul into a book, and you want people to say, "Oh, I loved your book," and so even the smallest criticism hurts like crazy. Once I got past that and realized it is what it is, I wrote what I wanted to write. People do seem to really like the book. They do seem to like the characterization. Um, and it in my opinion, it needed to be in there. It's a very much a coming of age story. It's a very much a maturation story, and part of that is sexual development. There's actually not that much sex in this book. I've read many books that have a lot more sex in them than this one, but I think it's weird when you're reading something that your daughter, your niece, or whatever wrote, and you're thinking, "My God, my baby! I remember when she was learning to walk." Whatever. The next book I write, the one that I'm working on writing right now, won't have as much of that content in, but I think it will have the same depth of characterization and the same depth of emotion. I hope that it does. So yeah, it's been living in fear that my parents are seeing this video. It has been the harshest feedback from family, from people related to me. People not related to me have just really liked the book. So it's been very positive feedback. I have to confess I haven't gone on Amazon to see what the reviews are because I'm terrified that somebody hasn't liked it. But
You'll like it. It's good.
oh, is it okay? Good, thank you. I'll let you look for me. I don't want to know. So yeah, positive. And I mean, it hasn't been enough to dissuade me from writing. I do have, I think I mentioned to you in a different conversation that I have another book that I'm working on right now, and I have a book of short stories that I'm also working on editing together.
Now, we've talked about what other people have thought about your book and some of the feedback, be it family or outside of family. What about yourself? What was the unexpected outcome of the book? What was it that said, gee, I wasn't expecting that?
Hmm. Well, not to be depressing, for about a year, I dealt with absolute crushing self-doubt. Like because this is the first book that I've actually written and put together and had ready for publication, before I realized that I was going to be able to self-publish. And so I wasn't struggling with self-doubt when I wrote it. I was just telling a story, having a good time. Ever since I published it and saw what goes into the editing process and getting it published and all that good stuff, I've discovered that when I sit down to write, I have a lot harder time getting my gears going, I guess. Every word I put to page, I think, do I like that word? Is this publishable? Are people going to like this? What feedback am I going to get on this? And you have that constant critical stream going in the back of my head. And so it took me about a year to get past that. But it still crops up every once in a while. And the way I've been attacking that is if I'm on the treadmill walking fast while I'm typing, I can't concentrate on self-doubt quite as much. So I treadmill while I write. I'm going to be the healthiest author on earth by the time the next book comes out.
I like that idea. No one has ever told me that. I've been interviewing authors. Or put it this way, I've been in book publishing since 1994. No one has ever said that to me.
It's true. It's true.
What is the message? What is the key thing? Not so much the message. Tell me what is the takeaway that you want people to get from this book? And again, we're talking about the book from Molly Elise, the book The Miles Between. Again, The Miles Between by Molly Elise. Oh yes, hold that cover up again. Hold that cover up. Let's
There
take a look.
Here's the book. So I think the takeaway from the book, what I want people to get from this is, oh goodness, this makes me sound like a romantic, which I absolutely am not. Everybody will tell you I am a cold-hearted man. The takeaway is that love can overcome everything, be it distance or growing up or people changing, that love conquers all. Gosh, that's sappy. But that's the takeaway from the book, is that love can conquer all.
Now, give us a preview of the book that you're putting together now.
It's very different. It is vastly different. Nobody's in love with each other, which is a huge step from the other book. The book that I'm working on right now is called Trash Fire Savior, and it's about the struggles we have with our conception of God and heaven and hell and the spirit that resides within us and around us and between us as human beings.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Let us have you hold up the book again, and hold up the book and The Miles Between, and tell people where they can get it.
All right, so this is the book, The Miles Between. You can get it in paperback, you can get it in ebook, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Kindle, on Barnes & Noble. You can go to your local bookseller and tell them that you want The Miles Between by Molly Elise, and they can order it for you. You can get it pretty much anywhere.
Very good, very good. My guest today has been Molly Elise, and she is the author of The Miles Between. Thanks so much for joining me, Molly.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is Your World Discovered. My name is David Ewen, and this is EPN.